hop in there and see what it looks like.
Perfect. So we just push live to YouTube, so should be adding to that shortly.
Awesome. We're live on YouTube. All right, so I think we get started. So Andrew, how about you introduce yourself? What is this? What is open office hours? And then just a little bit about who you are and what you do at Headway.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. So introduce myself. So I'm partner and CEO at Headway, and I think always good to just preface, you know, this sort of session where it's kind of ask us anything about design, product, and dev. So I'm involved with all of our teams across those. So as partner and CEO, um, making sure that we are delivering value in the right ways for our clients, and also in part of the partnering process, like making sure we're partnering with people and we know how we can help them. And so, very ingrained with our teams in that. So bring kind of that perspective. Obviously, there's caveats and things our teams are specialists in, but try to kind of bring that overall knowledge to the table here to be able to answer any questions you might have, or at least have a really good understanding of how you might approach it. And then also just my background is in design, so I went to school for business, self-taught design, have played many roles in startups over the years, ranging from design to product strategy to development, and so have played that role directly as well in different mediums. So just bringing that perspective, and since we are in COVID, just mentioning that I'm based in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is also where Headway is headquartered. So yeah, I'll go ahead and pass it to you, Jacob.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. So my name is Jacob Miller. I'm the marketing and brand manager at Headway. I help with things like this. We actually do 7. Yeah, it's crazy to think we do 7 live streams a month. 4 of them are this. So we do this every week on Wednesdays. And then also we do 3 other live streams that are more like presentation focused, that we record and then post up on our YouTube channel. So one part of the month we'll do design. One part of the month we'll do development, and then another one we'll do product strategy, which will be actually exploring product, which is a new kind of podcast type effort that we'll be doing with Ryan and Robert on the product strategy team. So we're super excited. We actually have our first interview with them at the end of the month here. So be sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications for that stream as well. We'll have Douglas Ferguson of Voltage Control. He wrote the book Magical Meetings and Beyond the Prototype. So it'd be really cool to just hear about how they've helped teams like do better innovation, have better meetings when it comes to innovation, because a lot of that stuff can be, you can be talking in circles about ideas. So how do you actually make traction, right? So it'll be really exciting to hear what he has to share. And you can join that discussion, ask your questions to him, which is really cool. That's why we're doing it this format. Yeah, just super excited to just keep doing marketing things with Headway, and looking forward to helping anyone here get their questions answered. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. And one of the things I think you asked at the beginning is like, what's the format of this? And I dropped your comment from YouTube here into the stream. So if you want to ask a question, you can join here if it's easier to do that over audio or video. And if you want to just ask in the chat, you can do that as well. But essentially, this is we have some questions that we've sourced about startups and building products from around the internet, to just kind of provide some context on how Headway thinks about approaching these, and then also you're able to ask questions and kind of be put in the hot seat, so to speak, where you bring your question, add some context, and then we'll start to work through it together and talk about similar things that we've seen in the industry, best practices that we know of, direct experience we have to really help you, keep moving forward. So feel free to ask away in the YouTube chat, or if you're interested in hopping up, as Jacob mentioned, drop a comment and we can send you a link.
Awesome. Do you want me to prop up the first question for you, Andrew?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So this first question is from Riab on Reddit, and they ask how to maximize my chances for success next time. So they share, my startup failed And while I can find millions of reasons of why it failed, I'm more interested in how to improve the chances of success for my next venture. I have a technical background, but I'm more inclined to handle the business eventually. But my background definitely feels more like a setback in the moment. Common advice given here is to go work for a company, learn the insides of the industry. And from my experience, a technical role won't help me with this. So, what are my best options? How do you really learn what are the gaps in an industry and improve skills necessary to be a non-technical founder of a startup? And yeah, so how can you be a successful startup founder with no technical background?
Yeah, I mean, and this is a common question that people have, whether or not they have tech background, right? A path that we see for people that do have that background is, hey, they went and built stuff either as a startup weekend or a hackathon, and it's not really something that they're trying to make a business out of. And so when they go to make their first startup where they have an idea and say, I actually want to bring this to market, I actually want to, believe in this and want to put my time behind it, they start with the build as well, and so there's a bunch of other talks that we have where we focus on this and really just building that empathy for the customer and focusing more on that, like getting into a curious mindset and a research mindset where you're putting all of your focus on the people you're looking to serve and the problems that you believe they have and how they're solving them today. And then, once you, there's a saying by Clayton Christensen, and I might butcher this quote, but he, unfortunately is late. He did pass away earlier this year, but he's a big proponent of jobs to be done and really this user-centric messaging, modeling, everything kind of around context. And so with part of the jobs to be done approach, and I'm trying to remember how I was going to tie this into that. His quote is saying, a question in the mind is where an answer can live. So unless you're asking the right questions, the answer that appears, you're not going to recognize it as an answer. So it's all about framing up, your curiosity and really being able to get in the mind of your customers and understand what they're trying to do, how they're trying to do it, what they see as substitutes. And I guess the through line there is when you understand the problem, the solution becomes clear. And I think like how a lot of companies and a lot of startups shoot in the dark is being able to build something, but not build something for the right people or with the right angle. I think a lot of solutions that are out there would be successful in different industries. And so you see even, venture capitalists and companies that will buy solutions and point it at a different problem. So my recommendation for Lil Wix 9 here from Reddit is to really focus on the people you're looking to serve and kind of detach yourself from the skill set of development of this build mindset. Teresa Torres is kind of an organizer and behind Mind the Product, and she says that building is a way to learn if you can do it quickly and if you can do it rapidly. So as you think about constraints in your time, and if you're a solo founder, talking with people is the most valuable thing you can do, and just prying and being really curious around what's motivating them. And if they do achieve something, like what's the value to them? Why is it important? And there's usually with jobs to be done, as I mentioned earlier, there's usually this arc and this path someone's on going from where they want to be or from where they are to where they want to be. And there's this arc in between that has these four forces, as jobs to be done says, where something's pulling them or pushing them towards it. But there's these emotional forces in jobs that drive people to make changes, to adopt new products. It could be the friction of existing solutions, all of those things. So really understanding the people and the problems they're solving is going to be paramount to you building the right thing. And so I don't necessarily think you have to go work for a company. I think, even some of the content our team's been putting out and some of the guides on talking to customers would be helpful for you to at least get a starting point and understand that you have to fall, and this is so cliche in startups, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And so really get curious and really dig into that, where you're not building anything. There's no pressure to build, a first version of something. And as you approach that, you kind of have an opportunity to then, once you understand those, what we call like problem interviews or problem discovery, you have this opportunity to synthesize and step back and say, hey, of the 10, 15 people I've talked to, what are the common themes? What are the patterns? Where are people struggling? Why can't they win? Right. And then you are kind of posed with an opportunity where, hey, I understand the problem. I understand the hurdles. Now, can you put, whether that's building something or using a prototype kit on Figma, where you can get it in front of them and try to sell early? And so a lot of the advice we have to our customers is, and anyone building new products is like, can you sell on a prototype? Like not just a value prop, but an actual tangible representation of that value to get out of their mind and into, into their hand if it's a prototype, or on their screen where they can believe that, it's there. They can see the value. They can see them using it. All of those things, and that's much, sooner than you building it. You could also, we've also talked about leveraging no code tools. Like with a developer mindset and background, you could likely make a lot of traction on no code tools. They build them for designers, but from a development standpoint, you'd be able to really grasp those quickly. So tools like Bubble, Adalo, those things would be useful tools to try and understand your customer, see what motivates them, see if you can get them to buy or purchase, and then move into, how do you actually deliver on that value?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Andrew. I think we can head on to this next question. And this one's it's kind of related, but it's a little more specific. Um, but there was an anonymous user. The username on Reddit was a bunch of numbers and letters, and it didn't X, so it's hard to you can't really read that. But the question was validating a business idea, metrics, and methods. I am looking for ways to determine a good method of validating a B2B SaaS business that is focused on startups. Um, as the ideal customer. I was thinking that I could do a landing page, though I can't seem to find a clear consensus for what it should contain and how I would go about showing things without building a good chunk of the stuff first. After I figure out a method, I am left wondering how I determine the validation attempt is a success or not. And they say, I wanted to create this post to talk about both my validation situation as well as more general to help others in the same spot. I'm sure I'm not the only one here looking to how to validate their business idea.
Yeah, that's a good question, and a common theme for any startup launching. I think there's a whole theme of companies that have launched without launching, right? And they've perfected that. Our Superhuman was one of them, where they did a lot of marketing and a lot of messaging and things before they had a product. This pre-launch world, and so I think as so landing pages, obviously that's one part of it. But the things that you measure on the landing page are going to be important. As you think about, I'm trying to think of, early stage here. Like obviously channel development is something you can continue to hone over the life of your startup, but essentially you're trying to drive traffic to it and targeted traffic. So this is why having a well-defined customer is so important, because let's say if you had a startup idea and you were trying to serve 3 different customers, and we've talked about this a lot, Jacob, like even with our own site and other things, but your message would resonate much less with, let's say, a generalization. Let's say you were building a teaching platform for anybody who teaches, right? Like you'd kind of see some benefits. You'd be able to see some statements that were like, oh yeah, that's me. Oh, but then they have these features. That's not really me. And so you have people opt in based on the content and what they see on your page, versus if you were building a teaching tool that was very specific for, graduate program professors, right? Like you can very clearly target them, you know where to find them, you know how to really whittle down your search terms, and then you can understand your conversion rates on there. And what we do when we test a lot of times, so it depends if it's B2B or B2C, but we'll generally have 2 opt-ins. So one opt-in is, signing up for an email and being notified, like recognizing that it's in an alpha phase or it's not available yet. And then the next step is like, how do we build a next layer of intent? And so for enterprise software, that's like booking a demo or booking a call or discovery call, or if it's B2C or a consumer product, we'll actually try to pre-sell on Stripe or using something that integrates with the page. So we get to see conversion rates. So we see how many people have come through. We get to see conversion rates on a landing page, both to a newsletter and to some sort of higher intent activity, which would include discovery call, showing you that someone's motivated, or as I mentioned on the B2C product, an actual pre-sale where you have an offer where it is a discount. Like, you do have to entice people to sign up, but it's still, there's an exchange of money, in kind of a vote towards, hey, they see the value in what you're doing. So when we think about validation, we see those, and people kind of pay in a few different ways, either with their time. So getting on a call with you to discuss more about their problems, with their money, you're doing a pre-order, or with their reputation, where they're actually referring you into someone higher in their company. So if it's an enterprise deal, they might be a champion for you to their boss, or someone next to them at their company, and saying like, hey, we should use this, we should both go to this demo. And I think those are kind of what we look for when we're validating. And as you come out the other side of those, it's important for you to understand what were those forces and motivations that made people buy. And the people who just signed up for your newsletter, why didn't they buy, right? What did they understand about the offer? What didn't they understand to make it enough for them to purchase, right? And maybe they weren't an early adopter, but they were interested. They had the problem. They just, have never bought anything that didn't exist yet, or, any of those scenarios, which could be different. So, think about validation. And we actually talked about this, how you can validate with just landing pages and prototypes in one of our previous talks about, using the pirate model of startup metrics. And how would you think about, some of the investments that your customers or prospects are making towards validation, and confirming they have a problem, and, being willing and able to commit to something. So it's all about creating a door for someone to walk through, and then just figuring out and asking and understanding why.
Awesome. All right. I think we can go on to this next question. So if anyone's joining us right now, you're able to, yeah, there you go. Andrew shared it there. If you have a question about anything with design, whether it's Figma, design systems, no code, no tools, like how do you design in there, product strategy, idea validation, or anything to do with development, we're here to help. So if you have something you're stuck with this week on a project, you can actually join us on this call. We'll send a little link in the comments there, and you can hop in here and actually talk with us. Otherwise, feel free to just enter your question in the comments, and then we'll respond, and we'll be able to share the question on screen here, and help you out. So until we get more questions, though, it looks like I'll share another question that we have on Reddit. Um, so this question is from Juicy Kitten on Reddit, and they say, "Okay, I have my idea. So how do I start up?" And they share, "I have a marketable idea that I've done extensive market research on. I think it can be really profitable long term as it relates to cryptocurrency and blockchain. I want to get started, and I have some personal capital, but not much. I could get a loan, but I don't know where to go. I could potentially get an SBA loan. If so, where do I go? I know that I need to hire people too. For example, someone experienced with finance to check my assumptions with the software I'm designing, probably another developer, but I don't know where to start looking. Where do you even find like minded people to start a company with? Obviously, Reddit isn't the place, but where should I go? And I'm not business minded at all, but this is a killer idea."
Well, there's a lot there.
Yes.
So I think, like, saying you have a marketable idea that he's done extensive market research on, I think, relating to our last question is like, how could we validate that people are interested in solving it this way? Right. I think like um, there are just evolutions of different solutions out there in the market, and like using crypto and blockchain is just one way to solve it. So would recommend, even before you hire anybody, but to put your time and resources behind validating that there is a problem, and that people are willing to solve it, or willing and able to solve it, and are motivated. So putting up a landing page, maybe even working with a team, or a designer to try and my camera's floating here to try and get what we call like hero screens, like what's going to take the value prop that you're putting forward out of your head and put it into their mind. And so we usually use prototypes, or static mock-ups, or things that really aim, even if it's not the final version of the product or the value, but get a mental model out into a physical model, into something tangible that people can touch and feel, and they can start tying it to previous experiences they have, or previous platforms, or other things where they understand what this might look like and how they might use it just by seeing, one key screen. And the big part of that is being able to do those problem interviews and understand what your customers value the most, and then highlight that on your landing pages. So, you have this super valuable, view into what the application might be or look like. And then you have the messaging that backs it up. So people can kind of, essentially raise their hand and say like, hey, that's me. This looks super valuable. Let me go ahead and start taking some steps forward. And so there's lots of tools that you could do. You could hire people in. We've done work in Webflow, in Bubble to build landing pages, things like that. They're pretty intuitive. So if you were motivated and wanted to learn, you could also do those yourself. There's some really good communities around both of them where you could launch landing pages. Where you get to the design and the fidelity of it is kind of in question. So it would depend on who exactly your target market is in crypto or blockchain. If it's let's say it's a Fortune 50 company, or a fintech, or, some financial services company, they're going to need a higher level of credibility and security to adopt this. But if it's just a consumer on the blockchain side, you just have to kind of appeal and understand more of that market to appeal to them in a way that makes sense. But so me personally, like I wouldn't hire anybody quite yet. I think if you have the means and the time to do it yourself, I would go ahead and, try to distill down, interview users, try to distill down those insights into a value prop, and then be able to, understand what the opportunity is. I think, you mentioned here, I think it can be really profitable long-term. I think understanding your funding options between today and long-term and what that actually means is important, because a lot of startups will run out of capital before they get to that profitable long-term point. So if your funding doesn't match that or give you the runway, like you could run into a lot of issues there where, hey, you started, but you don't have the capital to move on. And, if let's say you raised $1 million and you hired a bunch of people and you were bringing your product forward, but it didn't get you there, and you had no customer traction or proof that people wanted it, it'd be hard for you to raise a second round on that. So trying to think through traction, in that way where you're building evidence for your case, for, early stage founders to join you. Hey, how can you convince other people to come along this journey with you, whether that's, a co-founder, whether that's an investor, whether that's, your customers. Distilling the value prop down, understanding the business opportunity is going to be really important. So trying to turn on that business mind and think through, really the economics of your company, think through what is the real opportunity for that, where's demonstrated demand, estimating pricing. There's a lot that goes into it. But would love to dig more into that and kind of how we approach that. How would you go taking this idea forward? And it's a lot of those things where it's, going beyond the market research and going into primary research, talking with people, and then using those conversations to then build out sizable obtainable markets, or SOMs, where you can understand what the actual business opportunity is for you and your investors. So kind of a long-winded answer, not a whole lot of clarity there, but rather than, or I guess not specific to the point he's in, but I think a lot of founders are in that area where they have an idea, they're not sure what's next, they might have some capital. The best place to start is with who you're looking to serve, and really drilling that and understanding the problem the best you can, and then gaining traction. Because what we've seen happen is even people who come in to Headway for the first time, or have maybe gone somewhere else to develop their app, is they started with developing their app, right? And now they're trying to back it into a market opportunity and say, hey, so we built this tech, where does it work? And I think that's a tough spot to be in, because you can't move as fast. You've likely spent a lot of your resources already. And so starting with the problem, or your customer, the problem, and then ultimately the value prop in your solution is where you should focus.
Yeah. Are there any like free resources that like you would recommend for folks that just want to just like a basic understanding and like to guide them through this kind of like initial part of the process? Or before they even think about, right, like they asked about, like, where do you find talent, right? Like that, I think that's
Yeah.
that's a whole nother question. But I guess in your mind, what resources online have you found to be probably the most helpful strategically, so that you're not wasting money, right? You're not getting moving too fast without having the evidence, or when you if you're going to pitch, like, what are the key things to share with an investor?
Yep.
Like, yeah.
I think Y Combinator does a good job. So it's not an explicit end to end course, but they do record all of their talks that their partners and directors give internally and their guests give, and put those onto Startup School. So startupschool.org will help you understand more of the mindset around building lean and generating traction and how you can think about those things. I would say the other one that's really interesting that kind of forces you out of this build mindset, maybe not build is the wrong word, but out of this like, oh, I have to build this scalable product from the start, is just joining like MakerPad. So that's makerpad.co, or some of those builder communities where a lot of people are stitching together their value props through Circle, through Bubble, through Webflow, through Zapier, through Airtable, where you're still achieving the value for a customer, but you're doing it in a much quicker way, and you can actually iterate over that much quicker as well. And so I think like leaning on those and understanding their resources and their introduction to no code and things like that is super helpful. From an investment standpoint, I don't know if there's one point of truth, for all investors, or for all phases. I think it depends on, there's a lot of different options, right? There's accelerators, incubators. There's, as you mentioned in your question, there's SBA loans. There's all sorts of things like that where you could raise investment. The best thing to do, even if you had, maybe not the best thing. It depends what your goal is for your company. If it's to go big and be a huge global brand like Uber, you're gonna have to raise a lot of money to do that. If your goal is to, build a business that does $500,000 a year in sales and you're serving a very targeted niche, your approach is going to be a lot different. And so, the fuel that you need to get there, or the money is going to be different. And so I think understanding where you want to go with it is a big part of that.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
from an investment standpoint, I can't think of any specific resources that walk through end to end on that initial creation process,
Hmm.
of pitching, and there's definitely some resources, that we've been gathering, Jacob, that aren't live yet, that I think will be super useful for people. Um,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I'll have to think a little bit, none off the top of my head.
Yeah, yeah. Um, awesome. So if anyone's just joining us, you can ask a question. You can ask us a question. You can either ask in the chat, or if you want to talk to us on the call, we can actually share a link with you in the comments, and we will have you join the call. We'll help you, unpack the problem that you're trying to solve together, and hopefully that you find that valuable. But yeah, we'll answer questions about design, Figma, design systems, product strategy, idea validation, like all the things we've been talking about. We can help answer a specific question for you. So if you have one, be sure to share it. But until we get another question, I have actually another one that I found on Reddit. Um, and this question is from Drum Plane Twig. And they ask, those who followed Lean startup method to launch MVP quickly, then measure and iterate, how did you talk to customers? Then they also share, I'm curious of the logistics of how you have all talked to customers to get feedback on your MVP after launch. I'm launching soon and I'm unsure if I should just email my users with questions, create surveys, create a Slack, maybe a Discord, or just a feedback button on my app. What platforms, apps, or techniques did you use to talk to customers and get feedback?
This is a good question. I think, the number one way to talk with customers and to get feedback is just to have conversations, like no pressure, no sales, just dig into the problem. And this is a common theme that we've talked about. But like finding, we've helped to find people through Craigslist, if it's locally, Facebook ads to try and attract people, community forums, even places like Reddit, like understanding, where your customers hang out, I think is really important. So, I don't think you should just email users with questions. I think a big part of the interviews is being able to ask those follow on questions to really say, when someone says, "Oh, this is what made me do that," you can really dig in. Like there's an approach called the 5 whys that really helps you start to understand why is that important? What would that do for you? Why this or why that? Where essentially you're repeating yourself a lot, but digging in and trying to get to the root cause of what's actually motivating them to solve that in that way or to do that. So I would recommend, like, it is tedious, it is long, but you're going to get the best insights from your customers. And when we think through one thing I didn't mention earlier about validating, the metrics. So we'll use Google Analytics or Intercom or any, full story or different sites that help measure what someone does, but then we'll follow up with them. And so it's kind of partnering the quantitative view, which is, hey, what does someone actually do? What's our conversion rate? And then the individual anecdotal stories of why did someone do that? What are the motivations? Why is it important for them? And so combining the what and the why is really important for you to understand, like, okay, how, do I actually put this forward for my customer? How do I solve this problem in a way where it makes sense? And how do I talk about it? And so those types of questions will lead you into, better solutions. I would say, you said create surveys. I think, it does depend on what you're doing. Like we've done lots of willingness to pay surveys for existing customers that are on like beta products where they're familiar with you. You're not asking contextual. You're saying, what's your perception of price on this? And we follow a lot of ProfitWell's guidance on this, and Patrick and his team do a lot on pricing and on churn analysis. And they do this willingness to pay where you're sending a survey asking about high, medium, and low types of pricing through different questions. So I think that's okay. I think when you're getting feedback that's more dry and isn't really contextual through surveys, I think is important. Adding them to Slack's a great idea. I think, there's a big movement to a lot of people of like building a community, whether that's on Slack or Circle or on something where you can always tap into those folks. And you also get the ability to kind of see what comes up organically in between your community. What are the conversations that happen that you didn't start that are really important? Discord would be great. The feedback button on your app, I think, where we've used that is with Intercom. So using their Intercom live chat. But what that allows you to do in addition to the live chat and where you can respond and provide support kind of live is the ability to send different messages and almost use like drip campaigns through the in-app messenger, which is that chat bubble, or through email, where you can start to target people and do drip campaigns based on their activity. So let's say you're back to the point I made earlier. Let's say your app was an app for teachers that help them manage their graduate program and their customers. If a professor signed up but they never actually added their first curriculum or never actually added their first classmates or invited them, you'd be able to trigger a message through Intercom and say, hey, looks like you haven't added anything yet. What can I help with? Do you have, is it unclear? How can we help get you unstuck, as a way to nudge them forward, but also a way for them to provide feedback. The other thing, way to gather feedback for your MVP as you launch, is just creating fake doors. And, you can do this through basically having buttons or having graphs that aren't customized yet, or that are just like a holder state where people click on something and they think there's functionality. And you ask, hey, what do you expect to see here? Right? You try to get contextual information around features you haven't built yet, around their perception, without having to, interview all those customers and really understand who clicks, whether that's new buttons on your navigation or, a new tab that comes up. You can actually, in addition to that fake door, be able to do waitlists for specific features that you're about to release. So having a button that says, hey, this new functionality is out here, and then open up and do a wait list. Say, hey, would you like to be notified when this happens? And you can add them to a list automatically. So, talking with customers, recruiting people you can talk to one-on-one is definitely our preferred way, especially to get that qualitative aspect. If you're just looking for trends and like secondary research, there's likely a lot of papers and studies out there that you could lean on. But you also get into situations where you want to, measure both the qualitative and quantitative aspects of your existing. Let's say you had 1 million users. That's substantial enough where you wouldn't be able to talk to all of them, certainly, and you would want to be able to gather some more quantitative data where surveys would make sense, about their experience. So you can also use surveys as a screener. as a screener call to it. So in some early stage landing pages that we've launched, we've had surveys that are maybe like fake a profile input or fake, some version of the content they would provide us. And then with that, we'll get context around, is this someone qualified based on our MVP? Should we schedule a call with them and reach out and use surveys as a little bit of a screener? So hopefully those are helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think, even for me, just as a marketing person, I think it's even um, beyond the just improving the product, but also just improving like how you talk about your product on landing pages and stuff is definitely a big deal when you can actually go on a phone call versus just, I mean, there are tools out there obviously to get quick feedback on landing pages, but there's nothing better than actually talking to somebody about it. So, um, awesome. Well, actually, it reminded me. I actually shared the link in the chat about we have an event tomorrow, and we'll be live streaming on YouTube as well. But you can also register to join us on Zoom if you want to. Um, but it's all about like prototyping and feedback loops, and like how do you engage with potential customers either before or when they are a customer. How do you engage with them? How do you track all that information? How do you when you have all the information laid out like in a Miro board or something, what do you do with all that information, right? Like how do you like synthesize it to make it actionable? How do you uncover patterns, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to join us tomorrow, the link is in the chat there. Otherwise you can subscribe to our channel, hit the notification on the live stream for tomorrow. It's from idea to venture launch, prototypes and feedback loops. Awesome. Um, so I don't have any more questions, and I haven't seen any questions come up. But if anybody has a question that's watching now live on the stream, be sure to ask us in the comments. But if your question's a little too complex to ask in a chat, we can invite you to this call right now. We'll send you a link in the chat, and you can hop into the call with us, and we can talk about whatever problem you're facing and how we can help you solve it together. So be sure to just say hello in the chat, and we'll invite you in. But otherwise, I've been kind of like browsing on Product Hunt today just to kind of see if there's anything worth talking about. Um, and there's kind of one I find interesting is an app called Hugo. Um, I'm going to just share. I'll share that with you, Andrew, and then you can share your screen and we can walk through it um, together. I think it would be just a good opportunity to just kind of break down like their value prop, what it actually offers people, what are other competitors in the marketplace with it, because it seems like there are competitors for sure. So I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on it, Andrew. We can talk about it together.
Yeah, pulling it up now. Can
Probably
you see it?
maybe hide the lower third text there. I mean, people can see the full page. There we go. Awesome. So what's at the top of the site here? It says meetings, notes, tasks, all in one place. A tool for better meetings through centralized, actionable notes connected to your work apps. Okay. So I'm like already thinking in my mind, these things already happen for me in somewhere else, right? I don't know if you're
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm like, oh, I do that in Notion, right? Already. Or
Yep.
folks maybe use Evernote or they're using Google Docs already, right? They have habits kind of built in. Like they probably have whole systems. Like we have, Notion, a lot of our stuff is documented in a very specific way. Same thing with, people, whatever they have set up. It's like, this is a habitual thing. So it's kind of interesting to see them trying to solve like the task and note management space. So let's kind of scroll down and see. So it's free for up to 10 users. So it looks like it's for teams. And then after that, you'd have to pay. I'm sure there's some other limitations, like maybe amount of products you can link up.
Yeah, it's 3 minutes, so I'm not gonna play the whole thing. But
Oh, we actually have
seems to
someone in the chat said Hugo is awesome. So, yeah, what is your experience with Hugo? Like, what do you like? What do you love about it? And then like, I'm also curious, what do you not like about it? I'm actually kind of interested in like, and what were you using before Hugo or not Hugo? Seat. I was curious what was your process before Hugo, and then why did you switch to Hugo? I know there's a lot of questions there, but I'm like super curious. I mean, it
Yeah,
seems
it
to
can just
connect to most tools. So,
yeah, it seems like it connects, and then there's meeting notes, and you can send out a post about it.
hmm.
Maybe if we watch the video, it'd be clearer. But you
So
can link in your
T.
calendar, multi-user notes.
So it's less crazy than Notion. So like, what's it for you? What's the difference between is for? So yeah, for Notion, do you want to just hop? You can definitely hop on this call if you want to. We can just send them a link and join us,
Send
and we can chat about it.
Gotcha. Yeah, you get a notification in your Gmail account with the file attached. So there's other teams using it, so that's good. But I'm confused here is like because it mentioned meetings, notes, and tasks all in one spot. Um,
Yeah. So do you not use like Google Calendar then?
or you use it, but then you is it just the meetings? Maybe it gets into the other things. Connect your meetings with your work tools. A lot of integrations.
Find any note or task in seconds. So Hugo auto organizes your notes by attendees, companies, and meeting details. Interesting. That's actually super helpful. Huh.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I know, like sometimes with our events, we're adding agendas in there, like prep items and things like that. I'd be curious to see how it's just because it's living and breathing. It's a collaborative document, that somebody can add to.
Yeah. I think for
Yeah,
me,
I just
just
want to
because
see an
it does,
answer.
it feels like it does so much. I have so many questions without like opening it up. But I mean, it looks like you can start for free. Um, but then like I'm curious. So yeah, do you pay for a premium account or do you have a free account?
I mean, there's 20,000 plus others companies, right?
Hmm.
So they obviously have.
So, so yeah, it says the templates are super handy, and they're not a part of our team. They just use it for themselves.
Gotcha.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm really intrigued by it. That's why I like open it up. I do like this bottom kind of like call to action a little bit. Connect your calendar, invite your team, and experience better meetings in minutes. I like that kind of line. Experience better meetings in minutes. I feel like that should be like a stronger um like value prop somewhere. Hmm.
Hmm.
Very cool.
Doing it live.
Oh, you're onboarding?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it doesn't share anything private on screen. That's my only concern.
We'll just go back.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, looks interesting. We should check it out.
Yeah, I mean it has a ton of integrations. Sauna, HubSpot, Slack, Zoom. What are all the other ones?
Yeah, interesting here. They have, hey, we're live today on Product
Zapier.
Hunt. We have 24 hours to score the highest number of upvotes. Well, I guess, yeah, if you put it that way, you're technically not supposed to ask for upvotes, but
Mm-hmm.
they didn't ask. They just said, hey, could you help us? Interesting.
I do feel like there's a huge focus on less meetings because people are having more of them because you can't just do like if you're in the office, right? Like everyone's working from home. If you're in the office, it's easier to just casually ask somebody a question, but now you have to like schedule a meeting, right? Because it's everyone's working asynchronously. If you don't
Yeah.
schedule it, you might not be able to catch them like, oh, actually, no, I'm gone. I have to run an errand, or hey, something came up with my kids. Like you really have to be intentional about spending, like, so that's why I feel like there's so many more meetings, is because if you don't schedule it, people might not be available. Because they'll
Yeah,
kind
I
of,
think
yeah.
one of the interesting things, like for us, so Headway runs on EOS, which is the entrepreneurial operating system. A lot of our meetings are focused around task lists, right? Or as you think about like
Mhm.
L10s, like
Yeah.
we have a lot of project boards where like we just pull up the task list and we kind of
Yeah.
hammer through those or the questions. So it's interesting to think through like, you know, behavior change. Would we change our behavior to adopt a new
Yeah.
tool to write an agenda that says, "Hey, see this Asana board. We're going to work through this." You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Or like, what I'm trying to think of what types of meetings would be helpful where you're not building the agenda throughout the week versus if you're
Hmm.
familiar with L10s, there's the whole issue list building where you put issues on week to week and then you chat through them as they come up if they're not urgent. You chat through them then. So just trying to think through, hey, what types of meetings would we use this in where we don't already have like a screen that we're sharing that has like a shared agenda.
Yeah. I'm definitely like super curious about it. It just seems, I'm trying to figure out like how, or like what all the things that would stop me from doing, I guess. Like how it just, because it's like a whole new dashboard, right? It's like, would I never be in my calendar anymore because I do it all there, right? Like I don't know.
Right.
Like, does it work? Okay, so Seat shares. I think the biggest benefit is the fact that it simplify and minimizes steps. It is all in one, and they've done a great job, to be honest. Yeah, I guess I just have to experience it for myself. I guess I
Yeah.
gotta, maybe this weekend I'll just jump into it and see what's going on there. So, I mean, it seems legit. Like it seems pretty powerful. But the one thing I always think about, and I mean, this is true with any tool, whether it's HubSpot or Notion or something, is when you go all in on something, and then if they make changes or the company doesn't exist anymore, like you kind of, then you're like, oh, we have to like migrate everything or we lose everything or whatever that may be, right?
It looks
It's
like yeah, it looks like this integrates with a lot. So you might
yeah,
not have to create so much
it might
in
not
here,
be
but
holding data, it might just be referencing data. Like that's what
right.
I'm wondering. Like it might just be like a filter tool, basically. We're like, hey, because it says like hashtags, it sorts by uh meeting attendees, companies, right? Like keywords. So it's necessary. It might not even. It might just be sending data to Notion, Asana, wherever in calendars. It might not even be holding data, right? Like that's what I'm
Right.
kind of wondering. Like if that's true, then it seems like a no brainer. Um, but yeah, so I'll definitely have to check it out.
Yeah, Notion's API came out recently, so they only
Hmm.
have it for admins of workspaces of a certain size, but excited to see how tools, open up for task management and
Yeah.
also
Yep.
like just syncing to points because I could still see it being difficult to have your wiki for meeting notes in Notion or your wiki for meeting notes in Hugo, and maybe that doesn't push to Notion yet, and then being able to like just having multiple points, right, would kind of go against some of the friction based on your team and how it collaborates. But
Yeah. Yeah. Seat said they might be leaving Notion in a couple months because, or the past couple months, the server's been down. I couldn't access my files. Yeah, we've had a couple of moments like that, like an hour. Google Docs, go back to Google Docs and Sheets. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tools that help manage Google Docs and Google Sheets too. Um, so it's just kind of interesting. Um,
yeah,
I don't think. Yeah, I think whatever works best for you or your team is the best solution, right? It's like it's not necessarily about like what's better than the other thing. It's what's right for you. When it comes to finding the right tools for the job. So
for sure.
yeah, cool. Well, I think we can wrap this up today. Unless anybody has a question, I think we can just share just events we have coming up. I know we already shared. I don't know, Andrew, if you want to share your screen, we can just head to the events page on our website and talk about what we have coming up. Awesome. Yeah. So tomorrow, as we said, we have from idea to venture launch. We're going to, Ryan and Clint will be talking about. It's basically a live case study. They're going to be talking about the prototyping process and feedback loops. Talking with customers, validating an idea before you build anything or design anything. and a true, honest, real life approach for idea validation. Like, what is that process? The rough, it's not always a clean process. Like they're gonna walk through what that's like. What kind of meetings were they having? How did this, take all the information, analyze it, notice patterns, all that kind of stuff, and then how do they make decisions together to like launch a product? And then the next week on the 25th, we have for exploring products. Ryan and Robert on the product strategy team will be interviewing Douglas Ferguson of Voltage Control. He's the author of a couple books, Beyond the Prototype and Magical Meetings. So you'll be able to join. It's basically a live podcast interview, essentially. So if you have questions, throw them in the chat, and we'll be able to ask Douglas and Ryan and Robert questions, as you can see there. So if you want to check out at headway.io, you can grab his books if you want to check out his books and support Douglas and his efforts in the innovation world. So he's doing some cool stuff. And then we have some events come up in March as well. So you can be sure to check those out. One's on design mood boards. So how do you find, user interface inspiration for like your next app idea? If you're working on a project and you're a designer, like how do you kind of cast that vision for what the product will look like so that everyone's on the same page as you're going through the process of building it out, right? So then there's no confusion like, oh, I thought it was going to look like this, or you said it was going to look like that. Like there's a clear plan and vision casted with a mood board. And so that one's super exciting. Brianna's going to be walking through that from our design team. And we also have another one we'll be publishing up later today on the site about headless CMS comparison. So like, if you're looking for a headless CMS platform to use for launching a website or a web, anything like that to manage content, Jacob's gonna be walking through all the different options for building like on Gatsby and in React and stuff like that. So super exciting stuff. And I know we got also more exploring product interviews kind of scheduled out from here through June, but we'll be announcing those soon. Lots of cool stuff. And of course, we'll be here, same time next week for open office hours. And and we'll be here to answer your questions again and talk about product strategy, design, and development. But yeah,
thanks, Jacob, and thanks everyone. I just wanted to say this: if you're watching this in the future, or you're here at the live stream and you want to dig in, like book some time with me, you and I'll chat and really dig in, more personal, more private consultation. We'll talk a little bit more about your idea, some specifics, and get you kind of some more insights and frameworks and things that you can use in your journey.
Awesome, cool. This is fun. I liked using that. We used a StreamYard today. It's a new tool. We've been using Zoom, and this is the StreamYard tool. So all the visuals are all fancy looking, and I like it so far. How do you feel about it, Andrew?
Yeah, it's super smooth. I mean, it's all in browser, which is where a lot of apps are going. Like Zoom's desktop, you have to install it. You have to, this one you can kind of plug and play, which is awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Well, cool. Well, I think that's it for today. Thanks everybody for joining us. Any last words, Andrew?
No last words.
Okay, sounds good. Awesome. Take care, everybody.
I had to get that in there.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.